Hello. This is an old conference paper I wrote in 2014 dealing with social media and the public sphere, the example of printing. For ease of recording, I've divided it into 3 videos. There is a contemporary argument about the extent to which modern social media have played a determinative role in the development of social movements, such as the Arab Spring. Historians would commonly like to allow for the passage of time before identifying consequences of actions and events, however, warning against making hasty conclusions as to the results of recent events. This paper then examines some of the possibilities for social action unleashed by an earlier and well-documented wave of social media innovation, namely the development of printing in early modern Europe from the 15th century onwards. Printing had revolutionary consequences for Europe, but the picture is not straightforward, and various other factors must be examined to understand the pattern of its impact. In examining this impact, I will employ the concept of the public sphere, developed by the German sociologist Jürgen Habermas, and in addition to providing an overview of the social impact of printing, provide more detailed case studies of its role in selected major social movements. So this is the layout of the sections. So we'll start off with the importance of modern social media, the development of European print culture, and then Renaissance, Reformation, and institutions of control, all of which I'll discuss in this present video. And then later we'll move on to the printing regimes in Holland and England, and then particular movements, the scientific revolution, 17th century debates on economic questions, political movements in the English-speaking world, before I make some concluding comments. So, the importance of modern social media. Observers of several recent social movements have pointed to the important role played by modern social media, such as Twitter and Facebook, in the initiation and development of such movements as the Arab Spring from 2010 and the Ukrainian protests of 2014, and in the mobilization of their supporters. This is just a photograph from Bahrain, one of several countries where there were major protests which had a media linkage. So the importance of modern social media has been discussed quite widely by sociologists, most notably by Manuel Castells, and more generally commentators such as John Zysman and Abraham Newman have pointed to the revolutionary nature of the digital revolution. Whilst accepting that modern social media can play an important role in creating autonomous communication networks and so contribute powerfully to processes of social and political change, several commentators have warned against according social media an inevitable and overwhelming role in such change. Rather than examine these limitations with reference to this recent spate of movements linked to contemporary social media, however, this paper will look at the earlier impact of the European printing revolution of the 15th century, printed materials being effectively the first modern social media. My instincts here are those of the historian. It may well be too early to properly assess the genesis, development, and long-term significance of very recent movements, the end results of which are still far from certain. But it is much easier to trace the development and significance of movements in the past. In this instance, printing provides an informative instance of the importance and complexity of social media in impacting social change. To this purpose, I will briefly describe the early development of European print culture, note the impact of printing on the Renaissance and Reformation, and the emergence of official institutions to try to control printing, and trace the rise of relatively liberal printing regimes in Holland and England, noting the relevance of Jürgen Habermas's concept of the public sphere. I will also note the role of printing in the development of several major political and intellectual movements in the 16th and 17th centuries, notably the rapid diffusion of the ideas of the scientific revolution and the emergence of economic debate and the course of tumultuous political changes in 17th century England. Although printing first developed in East Asia, at least as early as the 3rd century AD, it mostly took the form of woodblock printing, that's xylography, and was extensively used to print the sacred texts of Buddhism and later other philosophies and religions. Important though these printings were, they did not have the revolutionary impact which printing later came to have in Europe. For the most part, they were performed within a traditionalist mode of thinking to preserve sacred texts, and in the case of the Buddhist scriptures, to attain and effectively mass-produce merit rather than diffuse knowledge as such. The Buddha would be found wherever there was a copy of the text. Note, I do not want to get into the complex arguments about the origins of printing here. Suffice it to say that printing appears to have developed independently in the West. In Europe, however, the significant aspect in the development of printing was typography, printing from movable type made from metal, rather than xylography, a method more easily utilized with an alphabetic rather than an ideographic written language. The basic techniques were first developed in the German Rhineland in the mid-15th century, but rapidly spread to other parts of Europe, particularly from the 1470s onwards, such that by 1499 printers had set up shop in some 251 centres across Europe. There were then around 1,000 printing presses in operation, between 30 and 40,000 titles had been printed, and the total number of printed books in circulation was probably at least 10 million volumes. I see in one book a figure of 13 million books by 1500. By 1550, it was possible to produce almost 3 million books in a single year, more than had been produced by scribes across the whole of Europe during the entire 14th century. Significantly, this form of mass printing did not spread widely outside Europe and its overseas colonies, a fact of crucial importance in tracing the subsequent struggle between traditional and innovative ideas worldwide. With the rapid diffusion of printing across Western Europe, large numbers of relatively cheap books, I say relatively, they could be expensive in terms of most people at the time, large numbers of relatively cheap books and other materials were soon being produced, covering a wide range of subjects, including religion, political ideas and practice, technology and science. There seems little doubt that this much greater availability of written material encouraged literacy, particularly in Protestant countries, where individual Bible reading was greatly encouraged. But it also led to a wider diffusion of ideas, as an author's views could quickly be circulated throughout Europe, and the popularization of knowledge, including the production of illustrated news sheets and the like, which could be accessed by the semi-literate and could be read to the illiterate. At a scholarly level, it also led to a more critical approach to texts, as mistakes and contradictions could be more easily seen and corrected. Mistakes in manuscripts, by contrast, might not be spotted, and when manuscripts were recopied, errors could sometimes creep in. Now let's look at the Renaissance, the Reformation, and institutions of control. The printing revolution in Europe soon had an enormous cultural, social, and political impact. Intellectually, it greatly strengthened the development of what has come to be termed Renaissance humanism, the process of rediscovering and reappreciating Europe's classical Roman and Greek heritage had already begun prior to the invention of printing, but the new technology rapidly consolidated it, enabling the wide circulation of new editions of Latin and Greek literature, history, and philosophy, as well as contemporary works inspired by these classical texts. Printing also strengthened the critique of the Roman Catholic Church. Questioning of church practices and institutions was not new, but had previously been successfully suppressed or marginalized. Now printing made it possible for the revolutionary ideas of church reformers like Martin Lusa and John Calvin to be rapidly disseminated across Europe. So began Europe's first successful modern revolution, transforming the whole of European society. Printing enabled the widespread distribution of Protestant tracts and anti-Catholic cartoons, and subsequently played a key role in the consolidation of the various Protestant churches through the publication of vernacular Bibles, sermons, and hymns. Protestant success, however, was not determined by printing, but by the conversion of powerful elites, including the rulers of those states that embraced Protestantism. Important new printed works included Lucretius's De Rerum Natura. This is a Roman Epicurean treatise, which actually provides one of the major sources of our knowledge of Epicureanism, and it was basically rediscovered. There were a few copies around, but it was rediscovered in 1417 and first printed in 1473. Then you have the Lusa Bible, which the New Testament was completed in 1522, the whole Bible in 1534, translated into German from Hebrew and Greek, and widely circulated in German-speaking Europe. And then you also have the presence of cartoons. This is a German anti-Catholic cartoon from 1521, basically suggesting very forcibly that the Roman Catholic Church was corrupt. And of course, you can look at these pictures without being literate, so printing had a much wider impact than simply on those who were literate. The spread of the new churches had several major consequences, including the destruction of traditional ideas of European cultural unity, pervasive religious division between Catholics and Protestants that fueled European warfare and revolt through to at least the mid-17th century, the development of a Catholic counter-reformation, including the work of the highly educated Jesuit order, the Society of Jesus, established in 1534, and in several Protestant countries a much greater concern with the spread of general education and literacy, Protestantism differing from pre-Reformation Catholicism in putting the written word at the center of religious practice and belief. The Reformation also sparked social and religio-political radicalism, as in the German Peasants' War of 1524-25 and the varied strands of Anabaptism. Religious and political authorities soon sought to suppress the disputations of the Reformation, and pressures for the control of printing increased as ever more volumes poured off the presses. Particularly effective here was the Roman Inquisition, established in 1542, which issued its first index of forbidden books in 1559. Covering the whole of the Catholic world, it sought to either destroy or prohibit entry to a growing list of books in all Catholic countries. It included previously published books as well as new titles, so the existing writings of the humanist Erasmus were added, as were such contemporary authors as Galileo, Descartes, Pascal, and later Locke. It was never completely effective. In countries such as France, those who wanted forbidden books might smuggle them in from Protestant countries, particularly from Holland, and some printers printed illicit books. But the Inquisition was able to destroy large numbers of books and create a climate of fear that led to self-censorship. Some books were successfully suppressed, however, and in countries such as Spain and Portugal, with their own inquisitional processes, books regarded as challenging were completely excluded. The Portuguese went so far as to prevent the establishment of printing presses in Brazil, for example, and the Spanish routinely banned the import of all books on science. Less extensively, after Protestant churches had been established as state religions, the former anti-authoritarian views of the first generation of Protestants generally faded away to be replaced by new orthodoxies. So many thanks for listening, and particular thanks to my patrons, Ian Palin and Tricia Williams. You're welcome to support my channel. You can press like. You can subscribe if you want to be notified of future videos, and if you want to support the growth of the channel, you can do so through my Patreon or PayPal links, which I'll give below. So have a good day.